first. I thought that was interesting. So, while all this big name talk, and Mike and I talk about this all the time, and we can bring him on. Now you're hearing because Trey Hendrickson doesn't show up, and TJ Watt doesn't show up, and now Jair Alexander. So everybody's like, oh yeah, now they're not getting those guys.
No doubt. Good stuff. Let's go to Mike Gill now. He's gonna join us here. Mike Gill Show at Mike Gill Show. You can follow him on all platforms and go over and subscribe to his YouTube channel as well at Mike Gill Show. He's the host of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN down the shore and doing 97.5 The Fanatic on the weekends. Mike, how you doing on this Wednesday, brother? Good to see you.
What's up, everybody? Yes, I guess yesterday was the final day of football for at least a month or so.
Yeah, if you can call it football, close to football, resembling football. But yeah, and some interesting takeaways. But we'll start with the hashtag no movement. Where's your listenership on Jair Alexander and TJ Watt and Trey Hendrickson? Everybody want everybody?
Jair Alexander definitely was up on Monday, which that one wouldn't be as strong as a hashtag no if you could get like a 1-year prove it deal type of deal. Like, listen, hey, you've been hurt the last 2 years. You haven't been able to be on the field. You want to come to a winner? We have a spot that we're interested in you, but I don't know that he would do that deal. I think somebody probably would probably pay him, give him extra years to come to that spot. Although, could the Eagles say, we'll give you 1 year, I don't know, $12 million? Would that be something they would be interested in? The other two guys, I think, are just too much. You'd have to give up too much to get Watt, Hendrickson, which you'd have to give up to get them and then pay them. I think you're out of the realm for those two guys, but I would think Alexander, you can at least make an offer and see if he's interested. I don't think he's as far-fetched.
Well, he's not as far-fetched from that as you explained it. You don't have to give up anything for him. So that, and obviously there's a big difference. TJ wants $40 million. Trey wants close to $40 million. Right. So there's also, the money aspect, just the sheer enormity of the money. But you mentioned that number, so we'll use that number, 1 year, $12 million. Like, if you wanted to pay a corner $12 million for 1 year, why not bring Darius Slay back?
Well, I mean, Alexander is a couple of years younger, than Slay is. So yeah, you could say, why not just bring Slay back? He's 28 years old, Alexander. Maybe you sign him for 1 year. He has a really good year. You like him or whatever, and then he's here for the way that now his problem has been the injuries, where Slay had an injury here, injury there. He wasn't perpetually injured. Jair Alexander has played he's missed 14 games the last 2 seasons. And a couple of years ago, he missed most of the year too. So yeah, he hasn't been in this, but he is a younger guy that you can at least say, hey, 1 year prove it deal. And then maybe we can work something out to keep you here. What's Slay, 34
well,
now?
He is 34, 33, 34, somewhere in that range. But, he's here. He's a team captain. He played at a high level. He's more, you're always concerned when you get to that age that the drop-off is going to begin. But to your point of, and Slay's a great player. Alexander's a great player. I'm not
very good player.
He's a better, when he's healthy, which has been rare, he's a better corner than even Darius Slay. However,
what I said on my show Monday, yes, you could make an argument that you would be making an upgrade if he's on the field and he's a younger player.
He said this will piss Eagles, but I've said it. He'd be the best Eagles cornerback in the building the minute he steps in. The Eagles have some good cornerbacks. That's how good he is when he's out there. But to your point about maybe things work out, it's more than 1 year. That I don't agree with, because if things work out and he's healthy and he's playing at a high level, he's back in the 20 million range, and I might be lowballing it. So to me, it's a 1 year thing either way. And I would
agree with that. I think it's far-fetched to think I think it's far-fetched to think that if you brought him in for 1 year, that then you could extend him for a deal based on you came here on a 1 year prove it deal. You came here, proved it. We don't want to pay you. Somebody else is going to have to do it.
Yeah. So, yeah, from that. And then the bit. This is a pure cover corner. And Vic Fangio went through this in Miami with Jalen Ramsey and even Xavier Howard, guys who are pure cover corners. And he's asking them to play all this zone, and they don't necessarily like that. So I think there's a bunch of conflicting things with. Plus, I think at the end of the day, I think he's going to get a decent money. I think he's going to get 14, 15 million bucks because he's good.
Right. I agree with that. You were just asking #no. He would be one that I wouldn't think would be a flat out no. Like the other ones, I think is kind of far fetched to think you're going to make a trade of that magnitude at this stage with the draft. Or like that's the kind of deal you probably make on draft night where you give up draft capital. I mean, you could say, well, you give a pickup next year, but that's down the road. Some of these teams, if they're doing something, they want some instant like gratification for the return. If they're losing a player of that magnitude at this stage of the offseason, something that can help their team in season. So that's why I think the other two are just not feasible. Whereas Alexander, I think you can at least make the call, say, hey, we won the Super Bowl. Would you like to join us? We got a 1 year deal waiting for you. They've had guys take that deal before, maybe not on his level, but he also has to understand, hey, I haven't played a lot the last couple of years. And you know what? I kind of feel I got it stuck to me by the Packers. I wouldn't mind playing them one game this year. And they are on the schedule.
That's true. And it might go, I think he's going to land in the division because all three teams are looking for corners, and he get him. If he's got that angst against the Packers, which I don't know if he does, get to play him 2 times at least.
I tell you what, I know everybody wants to be a man cover corner, but I mean, look at the corners here who just left. Darius Slay got $10 million at 35 years old. Isaiah Rodgers got big money as a backup, and Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell both got a bunch of great publicity all year long. Now that's a credit to the players too, but maybe Jair looks and says, boy, 1 year in Philly could maybe compete for a Super Bowl, playing that defense, and then I could sign a big deal at 29. I don't know. Maybe that's a thought process.
And by the way, man, and maybe it's because he's available, but Kelly Ringo showed up yesterday. Like if that guy's out there, that Jair Alexander's not even coming out of the Eagles' mouth, and he's young, and he's gifted, and they've been so financially disciplined this entire offseason. Are they going to wake up on June 11th after Kelly Ringo has his best practice maybe ever and say, hey, we're going to go get Jair Alexander, and we're going to pay even if he takes $10 million, which I think it's very rare for players to say, I want to go chase a Super Bowl and take $5 million less. But let's say he does. I just don't see it. I don't see Howie waking up and saying, you know what, screw it. Screw this financial discipline. Because Carter's still coming. Nolan's still coming.
Well, if you're only paying them for 1 year, you have been fiscally responsible enough to potentially fit the player in for 1 year.
Oh, well, they could fit anybody they want. They could fit Trey Hendrickson in it if they wanted.
Right, but you're mentioning that Carter's still coming and these other. If you brought Jair Alexander in for 1 year, it wouldn't affect having to sign those guys.
Yeah, it would, because it's about cash, and all of that cash is going to
Jair. If you're dishing out $12 million in cash, then yes, you might say, hey, I just handed you $12 million.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So It's all, in fact, it's all. Now you can, from a cap perspective, you could put on the 4 avoidable years and it doesn't, but from a cash perspective, whatever he gets, he's getting this year. And that's what the Eagles have been focused on, trying to create cash for what's coming. So it is about more than 1 year, even though he's only going to be here for 1 year. But they can bet anybody if they want.
Feels like to me that this better option is just going with Keely Ringo. I mean, if he's playing and he's under contract, I mean, that seems to me like the better option there. Now, maybe one of the other positions makes sense. The edge rusher room is obviously still thin, but I don't think paying that much money makes sense for this football team.
Not the way they've acted this offseason. It would be totally shifting gears. Now, they did it a little bit in-house with Dallas Goedert, but Dallas Goedert's here. He has been here. They know the player. He's been a big part of their success, and they did get him to take $4 million less. We'll see how that works out, but yeah, they've been very disciplined. 12 guys, Mike, they signed. Not one got more than 1 year. Not one got more than $3.5 million.
It's the way they do it, man.
Yeah.
You know, it's very reminiscent to their first Super Bowl, where they brought in a bunch of guys, Chris Long and LeGarrette Blount and Patrick Robinson, and they all got 1 year prove-it deals, but not nearly as much money as we're talking about for but a lot of the other guys they brought in this year, Uche, Ojulari, Adoree Jackson, those guys all fit the mold of the 2017 offseason.
Yeah. All right, Zander brought up edge rusher, so we'll shift to that. I'm starting to think this is another example of how he's zigging when everybody else is zagging. Because edge rushing, as we just brought up with TJ Watt and Trey Hendrickson, they both won $40 million. And Howie just went through Bryce Hupp, who he gave significant money and had to pay $26 million for 300 snaps on one season. Is he zigging now and saying, you know what? I can get similar production out of my young players, mainly Nolan Smith, Jalix Hunt, and then I can supplement them with Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche for a total of $5.5 million. Is he and then build up everything around him?
Well, he's trying.
Is he zigging when everybody else is zagging again?
He's trying to. I mean, he's trying to see if these young guys have it in them to take over. I mean, I think Nolan Smith, there's a lot of excitement. They drafted him in the first round. His first year, he did absolutely nothing. Last year, he kind of really came on in the playoffs. He was very good the second half of the year. He got off to a slow start. Does he have that next level jump in him to go to another level? I think there's a lot of people, I say, what do you have? 8 sacks last year. What is his ceiling? Is he a 14 sack guy? Is he one of these guys that's, an elite pass rushing guy that you're going to be having to pay big money to? You zag back the other way and pay him the big money. And then Jalen Hunt is just a complete wild card. I mean, you draft a guy in the 3rd round out of Houston Baptist. He was running around playing safety at Cornell 3 years ago. I mean, so it is a total wild card. But all accounts, last year playoffs stepped up. When Brandon Graham got hurt, there was a lot of concern about setting the edge and what are you going to do? And this kid came in there and, man, who's 58? Where did this guy come from? And the next thing you know, you're entering this season with him as potentially your top pass rushing option, him and Smith anyway. So they are zigging one way with a lot of hope that these guys will be able to take the momentum of their playoff run, and for Smith a little bit longer than that, and then parlay that into a 17-game season, and then sprinkle in a couple of veterans behind them. But yeah, they're taking a big chance here that I think a lot of people are excited to see if it works. And there's no, I'm not sitting here saying, what are you doing? How do you think these two guys are going to do it? Yeah, they showed in flashes that they can both be pretty good, but over 17 games, we'll see if they can hold up.
Yeah, I think that they're looking for something different too. And to John's point, like last year, guys, they had the #1 overall defense, and their leading sack artist was Josh Sweat with 8.5 sacks. I mean, you're talking about Trey Hendrickson, a 17-sack guy, TJ Watt, a guy who gets close to 20 sacks. I mean, I don't think they're looking for that type of edge rusher anymore, to John's point. I think they want every down guys who can set the edge, can play the run, and can rush after the passer and do it all at a competent level. And then your defense built around it can kind of fill in the cracks and be really good overall. So I think they're looking for a different type of edge rusher. That's why Hendrickson, it's like 17 sacks. They had the best defense in football last year, and their top guy at 8.5. Do we really need 17 sacks, or do we need a guy who can set the edge and play 3 downs?
Well, and, they had that guy in Hassan Reddick, right? They had him sacking the quarterback at an alarming rate and then decided we don't want to pay you to do that. That's not what we're looking for here. I mean, when you look back at the Eagles through their runs, you had a lot of good sack artists, but never like a 15, 16, 17 kind of sack guy. There's
Jason Babbitt was garbage. Jason Babbitt.
Oh, yeah. He was a sack chaser.
Yeah.
But generally, the 1 year with Reddick where he had a monster year and they got to the Super Bowl, and then he obviously comes back the next year. He wanted a contract based on the fact that he got 18.5 sacks, and they didn't want to pay him, and he didn't have as good a year, and then they let him walk out the door. The point might be, do they want to pay that position, or do they feel confident enough in themselves to just keep finding guys at that position? Because they do like to draft at that spot.
Yeah, and the question's going to get answered quick, though, guys, on Nolan Smith. Like, what is Nolan Smith going to get paid? You know what I mean? Because right now, John, you're right. They got 4 dudes, and they're combined $5.5 million. Well, that number is going to balloon real quick if you're going to pay Nolan Smith. I'm curious to see what they would end up doing there. I do think they'll pay him, but I'm curious to see how it
Well, it
out.
is because I think about it. Like TJ Watt's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, just a phenomenal player. And I was thinking about it because I'm like, do I really want to pay that guy $40 million? I have a certain allotment. And this is I'm not, this is about the bit. And fans that don't like talking about the business, a lot of fans, the business end of the sport, but it exists. And I'm like, if I'm a GM putting together a team, I don't know if I want that. I definitely don't want it with Trey Hendrickson. We're a great player. I'm not disparaging him as a player. I'm not paying that guy $40 million. Same thing with Derek Carr at quarterback and Kirk Cousins at quarterback, who I think are 2 of the most underrated quarterbacks and get shit on. And they just had good, solid, above average starting quarterback careers. And I always said about both of those guys, they're probably better than your quarterback. If you're talking all 32 fan bases, they're always above water. They're always above average. But they have limitations. And you have to, because of the nature of the position, and the same thing with edge rusher. And these guys are great. I'm not comparing them to, in the case of TJ especially, he's one of the best pass rushers of his generation. Top of the market, top level, every way you look at it. But do you really want to pay those guys $40 million when they break? Then you're screwed. You're trying to build a football team. As Nick always says, greatest team sport there is. You can't win with a guy just getting 20 sacks and having a bad defense. That's what happened to the Bengals. Defense was awful last year. Trey Hendrickson was great, but the defense was awful. It's an interesting discussion. I don't know if I want to be in that business of paying an edge rusher $40 million, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think you might be right, John.
Well, the interesting thing is, you look at the teams that have been winning recently here. You've got the Chiefs with Chris Jones, an interior guy. You've got the Rams with Aaron Donald, an interior guy. You've got the Eagles with Jalen Carter, an interior guy. You talk about zigging and zagging. The league might be saying, hey, getting that push from up the middle might be more important, and going the cheaper route on the edge and finding some guys who can, get a little burst. The Eagles have kind of had a good plan of having a bunch of guys who can get to the quarterback. 8 sacks from him, 8 from this guy, 4 from you. That's kind of, and then Carter getting the push up the middle, not going to rack up a lot of sacks from that position generally. But if you can get 6 to 8 in the middle, much like Fletcher Cox used to get a bunch from up the middle there, And the Eagles didn't have big sack artists around. Brandon Graham was never a big sack guy. You used to, belabor the point of, everybody looks at the sack numbers, but how many hurries is he getting? How much is he rushing the quarterback to make mistakes? And that a lot came from, Fletcher Cox is getting double teamed in the middle. Brandon Graham might not sack you, but he's getting pressure from the outside. And that's kind of been the Eagles' way that they have kind of designed their defense. They've had a bunch, Sweat's been around for a while. He's never been a big sack number guy.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. Offensively, Mike, I think it was a really sharp spring by Jalen Hurts. I think that's a positive. There's been a wave of, and Nick was asked about this yesterday, and we've talked to him behind the scenes, which will be coming out in the weeks ahead. But, this thought process that everyone assumes that the constant churn at offensive coordinator, play caller is a bad thing. And can it be a good thing? Because you're learning from different people. You're learning from different minds. They're all good coaches. Can it be a good thing? And Jalen was asked that as well.
It depends on how the individual person takes the information in. Is he blocking the information because he valued the information that he got from somebody else? And then is basically saying, well, you're not as good as that guy. I don't think that's the case here because Nick, the one thing I thought Nick said yesterday in regards to Patullo, which was, last year, Kellen Moore during this particular phase, he had to meet everybody. He was just getting to know everybody. And that kind of like overtook the practice session of, hey, I'm Kellen Moore. Here's what I'd like to do. Yada. Where Kevin Patullo's been here for 5 years. They just walked out on the field like a normal day, and they just had him taking things over. Now, so it's not like you have some different guy from the outside coming in and saying, hey, I got a whole new philosophy for you, Jalen. Wait till you hear what I'm going to throw your way here. And him being like, really, dude? Like, we just won the Super Bowl? Like, no, this guy's been here, and you're not expecting some kind of crazy new presentation to try to win Jalen over, I would think.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting because I think people automatically assume change is bad. And because you do have to evolve. And sometimes, and that was Jeffrey Lurie's whole position after the collapse was, well, we need outside voices because we have to evolve. Now, ultimately, I don't know how much they evolved. It looked just like the offensive was. I think everybody defaults to, if you're a good coach, and I think the Eagles generally have good coaches and have hired good coaches, you default to what your players do best. So the end result ends up with what Jalen Hurts does best. That's where it always ends up. So it looks very familiar. So, but you add little tweaks here and there. And
I don't think we all have an idea of what kind of role and voice did Patullo have on this team during his tenure. He's been here for the whole time. He's been here with Sirianni since the beginning.
Well, he's second in command, really, that entire time. For people that don't know, I always go back to he's been Nick's right-hand man. So, you go back to the first year when Nick got COVID, a lot of people forget Kevin was going to coach that game to the point that he was the one doing the in-week press conferences. He was going to be the head coach if Nick was unable to get back from the testing, which he did. So it never came to fruition. And then he's been the associate head coach and pass game coordinator. So he's been working with Jalen weekly for that entire span that you're talking about, Mike. So I think that's part of the comfort. They've been around each other for a long time. I think I think if anybody's concerned about that, I don't think if they don't go in there, we all know their expectations. Their expectations are ridiculous, which is win the Super Bowl or it's a failure. So it's hard to win the Super Bowl. They might not win the Super Bowl.
Think about, I saw an article this morning. They lost 5 starters on defense. 5.
Yeah.
And Pro Football Focus, take them for what you will, still says that the Eagles have the best roster in football. I mean, you lose 5. Take any team in this league and take 5 starters off.
And they were good. And they were good starters.
And every one of them left and got paid to leave. Not just, hey, the Eagles didn't want you back. They got paid historic money for some of these guys to walk out the door. And Pro Football Focus still says the Eagles have the best roster. Go handpick any team in the league and take 5 starters off one side of the ball.
Yeah, I agree. And they're in the conversation. Now, there are other teams that you could argue. Detroit's still in that conversation. Baltimore's in the conversation, but very few. The Eagles are still in the conversation. Yeah, they have so many good players. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous.
So many good young players.
Well, they had good young players, old players, middle range players. They had everything. I mean, you think about Darius Slay is over 30 and Brandon Graham is over 30. They have some of the best over 30 players last year. Guys in their prime, young players. That's why Howie gets the props he deserves. Mike and I spiked the football because we were early on that, but I digress. We deserve to spike the football. And now you're at the point where I go the opposite direction with Howie because everybody acts like he never makes mistakes. So now I gotta reel him back in, Mike, as evidenced by Bryce Hall.
That was part of the conversation. You know, when people hated the guy, they hated him for missing a couple of draft picks, key draft picks. By the way, I'm not downplaying where they were in the draft when you drafted Rager. That was a major
Andre
miss.
Dillard was a mistake.
Dillard was a miss. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside was a guy who was a second-round pick, never panned out. And there doesn't help when there was other players in that radius that you could have had at the same position. It makes it look worse. But my point at that time was, look, you're going to go 50-50 in the draft. The best of the best miss on draft choices. But what else are you doing? The creative things that he was always – this goes back a while ago. He was always able to manipulate the cap, find, trades with teams where you're like, what the heck was that team thinking? Like, that was always going on. The draft misses were happening, but you anticipate they're going to happen. Now, on the flip side here, they've hit on every draft pick, which is outrageous, the hit rate they've been on in terms of finding talent in the draft. But yeah, I mean, if you are grading someone solely on just the draft, well, then, yeah, you should have said he was not doing a great job at that time. But there were other things that they were doing, that you're like, man, even if you brought in somebody else and they drafted better, some of the things that he's able to do, no one else is coming up with, this little trade here and that little trade there and this little move there and that little salary extension there and, another rework over there. Like, there's just so much that goes into that position that I don't know that a lot of other GMs in the league, or what we see that they're not are capable of. So, in other words, long story short, you're going to take some misses in the draft because that happens to the best. I don't even like the hit rate in the first round of the draft is.
It's basically 55. There's, it's interesting, and people should Google this. Eric DeCosta is one of the best GMs in football in Baltimore. There's a clip of him talking about this loser's curse theory regarding the NFL draft, which is, basically there's no guarantee. And the whole philosophy is the more swings you get at bat. So if you have 10 picks, like the Eagles said, there's better chance that you're going to hit. Everybody's about 50-50. So there was a huge Ivy League study about this, and it turns out that that's what they found. Everybody's about 50-50. So to have the kind of hubris to believe that you're better than other people is going to hurt you in the long run. as opposed to getting as many draft picks as possible. And you saw it with Andre Dillard. It's a perfect example. Well, you missed, but then you got Jordan Mailata in the 7th round, which is, there's a lot of luck involved. But
yeah, that's why I think that he didn't get as much heat on the Dillard. The Dillard pick never felt like, hey, you're an idiot. You took the wrong guy, but Rigger and JJ Arcega-Whiteside, I think those were the two that really stood out.
Well, yeah. And then
position back-to-back years, and you were really struggling at that position. And, those two players had other players in the vicinity that you chose over a Justin Jefferson. The DK Metcalf thing is murky because he had a medical red flag that the Eagles, couldn't.
Well, and that's the thing. There's a lot of context. Like the Eagles medical staff took DK Metcalf out of their hands. They could not take him until day 3. That was their belief. And obviously it has worked out for Seattle. Now it'll probably work out for Pittsburgh. But a lot when you're like, well, they should have taken DK Met. Well, their medical people said they shouldn't. So it's not really a conversation. But and it's called The Loser's Curse, and it's by Cade Massey and Richard Thaler. And, it basically opines that the most logical approach is to have more draft picks to increase the chances of landing good players versus, the draft is more about that than having, strategic brilliance. And I think people who think, oh, I know better than this guy, that kind of hubris is going to bite you in the ass long term because as you point out all the names, like you can have a run and the Eagles are in the middle of a run. And to me, the best thing about Howie's the pivots. He screwed up as you mentioned, 2 straight years, big time picks, receivers. Then it ultimately trades for A.J. Brown. He drafted Devontae Smith before that. Trades for A.J. Brown.
Yeah, but there's some people that there are some fans, this is an oddity about a certain pocket of fans who are so fixated on draft success that, well, if you would have hit in the draft, you wouldn't have had a trade for A.J. Brown. Like, you don't get credit for the Brown trade because of the mistakes you made that forced you to go get Brown. You know what I mean?
But I would argue those people, and they exist. I'm not saying that. You're 100% right, Mike. But they're not actually studying the results of the draft, because if they were, they would see that the draft's basically a 50-50 proposition.
Well, right. Well, and it is I talk about all the time. Fans default in baseball, basketball, especially football, to blaming the coach or the manager because they know they are not good enough to actually play, but feel that if they manage the Phillies, that they would do a better job than Rob Thompson, or if they were coaching instead of Doc Rivers, that they in fact could do a better job than Doc Rivers. And in football, maybe they don't think they could coach the game better. There's a lot of intricacies in coaching, but because they play fantasy football, they believe that if they were the one scouting, that they in fact could do a better job than some of the guys that are in there, even with the statistics that you are saying is 50-50. There is that hubris of, I could do that job better than that guy. I think that highly exists, which is why people default to blaming the manager and the coach so often in baseball and basketball, and then GMs in football a lot.
Well, I agree that exists. And it amazes me with football, because football is really complicated. And don't get me wrong, because I don't think anyone could do it at a high level in baseball or basketball either. But football's really complicated. Like Zander asked me a couple weeks ago, do I think I could put together an offense? I don't know how you described it, Zander. Call plays, whatever. I could call plays, and not embarrass myself, as long as you give me the big Cheesecake Factory menu. I can't build that Cheesecake Factory menu, I can't teach that cheese to let the players. No fucking way. Not even remote. Not even to the point of not embarrassing myself on the first day. Football's complicated.
Yeah, there's certainly. I certainly wouldn't be able to design the plays, tell the guy, like figure out who blocks where and why.
Exactly. That's the hard part. That's what I constantly try to preach. It ain't the play calling. That work is it's doing the work to get that sheet. And then you got, all right, it's third and short, fourth and short. It's all there. Start mid-range.
Well, it's the element of playing John Madden football where the plays are already mapped out and made for you. You just have to select the one that you want.
Yeah. The hard work is building that. And then I'm not saying some people have a better feel. I think Shane Steichen had a great feel for play calling. So to pick out the right play in the right situation, I do believe that's a skill, but it's far less than building it, than building the offense, than putting that offense together. And that's the boring part of the job that nobody understands is the much more difficult part of the job.
What is wild. I mean, obviously they listen to a lot of their scouts, I would imagine, and you have to just trust, I guess, what these guys are saying and telling you. And when you draft a guy in the 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th round, you're thinking to yourself, how did you even have time to see this guy or know anything about him? I mean, you're taking a look at film and tape and this and that and everything on like 500 players. And you're like, as Howie Roseman doesn't have time in his day to look at a guy who probably will make no impact on his or very minimal impact on his roster. He's just totally going off of what somebody told him. Hey, this guy, I got a guy at Purdue. He's a linebacker. He can run. Nobody knows about him, but I saw him play 4 times. And, like that is the whole process of getting prepared for the draft is made for failure. Seriously.
Yeah. Well,
you cannot watch a kid play from Indiana, Purdue, Michigan, Illinois.
Well, the Eagles have a deeper scouting staff than most, so Jeffrey deserves a lot of credit for that. They have a much deeper bench than most teams. Number one, they don't really like. You'll see Dane Brugler's the beast, and you'll have 500. They're not. They're much more boiling it down. You might end up. One year Bill Belichick is the lowest number I've ever heard. His draft board was 70 people. That's it. It's usually somewhere 150 to 200, I would say, on the upside. But one year he had it boiled. He didn't have a lot of picks that year, and he boiled it down to 70 players. That's it. So I think a lot of people see that big Dane Brugler beast thing and they're, oh, what are we going to do here? They've already boiled it down far more specific for what they want and what they're looking for. But it's still a crapshoot. Yeah. I mean, and they have more information than all because they have the health information. They get to talk to the players. So they get to see the personality part of it, which is something that, draft people don't get to see. And that's probably the most important part. But yeah, you definitely have to rely on your scouts who are working they're on, the guys people don't even know, like Lee DiValerio is the Southeast scout now. And in the past, it's been Alan Wolking. It's been Phil Baya, who goes down there a lot. These are names that are rarely mentioned, but like they're at Georgia. They're boots on the ground. Learning about the players and the program and things like that. And you definitely, Howie can't do it. I mean, every once in a while, you remember that famous picture of him at Kenny Pickett's game with the binoculars. It was local, pretty much it's easy to get to Pittsburgh. obviously you can't go around the country. So you got to rely on your scouts. And they've done a good job. And that's why they have significant attrition almost every year, because people try to steal from the Eagle scouting staff and generally do. But yeah, you got to trust those guys because they're the ones on the ground. So
blame them.
Yeah. Mike,
nobody knows who they are.
Go ahead, John.
Nobody knows who they are for the most part. Some people do. Some people don't.
Yeah, there is a line of thinking that those guys deserve more credit in Philly. Mike, any other final takeaways, brother, on the mandatory mini camp? Only one day, Mike. What's up with that? I'm like, I can't call this a camp. It's a mini day is what it is.
Yeah, it was. I'll tell you, my takeaway is the Eagles won the Super Bowl. And essentially, Nick Sirianni spoke, I think it was for 12 minutes yesterday, and there really wasn't much to ask him. I mean, it seems like
part of that is he doesn't answer. Come on, Nick.
Cincinnati's, trying to figure out what to do with their star defensive end. Pittsburgh's trying to figure out what to do with their star defensive end. They got a new quarterback in there all this. I mean, it seems like there's just chaos happening all over the place. And here is a team that won the Super Bowl, and it's just kind of flying under the radar on a, they're just taking their one day that they have to be here and go back and hang out in Sea Isle the rest of the summer, everybody. We'll talk to you in July. Sounds like they were just like, we'll do it. We'll all get the band back together. We'll have some fun and go back to live in the summertime. Yeah. No, it's been pretty, that's the big thing is, Vic last week, I guess the one thing was Vic said that Campbell would be mid-August, and then yesterday Sirianni didn't want to really give a timetable on that one. But other than those type of things, not a lot of drama at the Eagle camp. No CJ Gardner-Johnson here to ask him, hey, what's going on with all that? I mean, he's doing all his stuff from another place so they can deal with all that stuff.
And Nico. Deshaun Jackson was there yesterday, and he and the Delaware State coaching staff. That was exciting. They're going to play Norfolk State at Lincoln Financial Field.
Who draws better, Norfolk State versus Delaware State or Temple?
Boy, I think Deshaun and Mike Vick will draw a little bit better.
Yeah, than Temple definitely. I think so.
Yeah, I think unless Temple's got a big opponent. Like 1 year Penn State came in, 1 year Notre Dame came in. They had big crowds.
Those days are over.
Yeah, unless that happens.
Although I do like Casey, coming in as the coach here. I think Keeler is a good recruiter, good,
great at Delaware, man. He was great at Delaware. Where'd he go?
Yeah, I mean, he knows the area well, that kind of stuff. They brought in some coaches that didn't have a lot of time. I mean, they just seemed like they were just taking random shots at guys who didn't have a lot of ties to, I mean, not that Temple has got this rich football history, but it'd be pretty beneficial to try to at least recruit New Jersey and the area and get those kids to go there. The college football landscape's a disaster right now.
Oh my God, it's awful. He was at Sam Houston State. That's where he went after Delaware. And that's where Tristan McCullum went. So
I don't know, guys. It's gonna be a long slog to training camp here. A lot of quiet Eagles, not a lot of drama right now.
You get all the speculation stuff. That's why I'm hoping that
get the list season ready.
They're too good, Mike. We're not used to this, man. We're used to mayhem all off season normally, dude.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you'll still get the list season, my favorite season. You're right about that. Chris Sims came out with his disrespect list.
I'm gonna have to put John through hell for the next month on list and bullshit and speculation and projection.
My advice, including my own list, which I don't do very often unless I'm forced to do it. If you don't like somebody's list, just go to the next list. Who cares? It's one person's opinion.
Yeah, I know. Like Chris Sims has Jalen Hurts 10th. He actually moved him down from 9.
He moved him down. Yeah, he moved him down. Yeah, I defended Chris Sims because I think over
the guys that he put in front of him, I said weren't egregious. I mean, Matthew Stafford's a pretty good quarterback, won a Super Bowl. C.J. Stroud, I probably would take Hurts over Stroud, but If you're just going off of talent, maybe. I don't know. The other guy,
Baker, Herbert, and Jaden.
Yeah, Justin Herbert. Not egregious.
No. I PFF had him number 12 last year. I think people forget because it ended so well. It wasn't his best season. It wasn't even close. 2022 is by far his best season. By far. He was legitimately the runner-up to the MVP, deservedly. He was phenomenal that year. So I think people get caught up in the recency bias, and then you win the Super Bowl, and it's all, last year was his best year. Jalen would be the first to tell you last year wasn't his best year. So
yeah, he's always a tough one.
Yeah.
He's
tough on himself. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm just saying to evaluate. I mean, he wins the Super Bowl. Shouldn't that mean that he's, not necessarily. Just because you won the Super Bowl doesn't mean you're the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Be easy to pick the winner of the Super Bowl, or we're just the best quarterback.
A fun preview of the next 5 weeks. So here we go. Looking forward to it. Mike, thank you for joining us today, brother. Bud. We appreciate it, man. Make sure you guys follow him at Mike Gill Show and go and subscribe to his YouTube channel, 2 to 6 every day on the 97.3 ESPN, down the short and weekends on 97.5 The Fanatic. Mike, thank you, brother. We'll talk to you again next week. Thank you, man.
All right, see you.
Thanks, bud.
Joining us here on Birds 365. Great stuff there. Great segment from Mike Gill. Good takeaways from practice and a good breakdown. Good football conversation you guys were having there between John and Mike. Great stuff there. We'll get to our commercial break. And then we have Brandon Lee Galton coming up in about 10 minutes. John, BLG was down at practice yesterday too. So good takeaways from Mike. And now BLG coming up as well. So he got to watch the practice as well. So a good show here today on a Wednesday, Johnny Mac.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get into more of those esoteric topics. Maybe I shouldn't say that but we'll talk about everything.
You can say that. That makes sense. Esoteric is a good word for those topics.
Yeah. Well, list season, as we said. And I'm sure everybody will be talking about Jair until he signs with somebody else. I'm sure everybody will cross their fingers for bigger name fish at edge rusher until they work things out. Yeah.
Good stuff. Johnny Mac, let's get to our commercial break. Appreciate everybody being here. We got a big crowd in here today. As always, we appreciate all of you guys. Hit that like button for us. I don't know what we're at on the likes, but let's try and get that up to 100, 150 at least today during the live show. We appreciate all of our great viewers. Comment down below in the live chat. We'll take some comments on later on in the show today, especially any super chats if they come. All right, we appreciate each and every one of you. We'll be right back in 3 minutes on Birds 365.
Welcome to the Jet Setters and the High Rollers, to the Shot Takers and the Tastemakers. Welcome to the Viewfinders, the Thrill Seekers, and the Night Owls. Welcome to everything you could possibly want on one 5-mile island. Welcome to the Wildwoods.